let's look at the front pages for you. This morning we'll start with the Telegraph. It leads on the controversial new plans to fit all cars with speed limiting devices.
The Mirror reports on Harry and Meghan's surprise Windsor visit, with the royal couple vowing to bring their 2 young children to visit in future.
The Times has the news that SAS troops are training local forces in Ukraine.
The Guardian continues its coverage of the PM's Rwanda migration plan, quoting United Nations officials who call it a symbolic gesture doomed to fail.
The Eye has Rwanda reporting migrants will not be deterred by the scheme, it says.
And the Star covers Britain's Easter heatwave, although warns that the sea is still too cold to swim in.
The FT has Elon Musk's attempted takeover of Twitter as senior company executives attempt to return the hostilities.
The Express predicts a £2 billion Easter boost to the economy as Brits choose to stay home rather than travel abroad.
And the Mail covers the excessive work from home liberties given to civil servants.
I love the way the Express always tries to, if they can, they always try and go upbeat, don't they? So, you know, the fact that we're staying at home for Easter is going to be a boom to the economy.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Does make you think, though, if we should be deliberately staying at home to boost the economy.
Yeah, that's right. We should. Do you remember in the 70s, we had a sort of Buy British campaign? Used to go around with little badges that said, Buy British, Buy British.
Really?
Ever had the option Buy British? Yeah. I suppose that would be seen as not being very inclusive nowadays, wouldn't it?
Oh, it's quite a good idea.
Yeah.
What's wrong with it? Anyway, we shall see. Former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall and the late editor of The Eye, Benjamin Butterworth, are here to take us through the papers.
Hi there.
Good to
morning.
see you both.
Good morning.
Claire, let's have a look at The Guardian and this Rwanda scheme. The UN is getting stuck in on it now.
It is, and it's quite interesting that you've got the High Commissioner Gillian Triggs wading in on the row, stating that it could well break international law, and especially in discrimination terms, which is something that people don't necessarily want to have a look at. And I think what she suggests is that we have come up, the United Kingdom has come up with bespoke schemes for Ukrainians, for Syrians, for Afghans, for Hong Kong nationals, but now we're not going to do this for anybody else coming over. So you could fall foul of the UNHCR rules on that. Now, whether that makes a difference to those in power, let's have a look at it. But I do think it's worth noting that we will run a 2-tier immigration system, which is not what it is supposed to be.
Isn't that our right as a sovereign nation?
I think you can run a system to get the skill sets into a country, but I don't think you can discriminate on the basis of how people have arrived. That is certainly against the Refugee Convention. So that would be a breach of international law. And why should you be able to choose who comes, as in the method of travel? Surely, if people are coming here to seek asylum, it's because they are desperate. So why are you going to say, well, you can't come in because you came in on the back of a lorry, but you, well, okay, we'll have a look. I'm really uncomfortable with this picking and choosing. I think you have an immigration system, you have a set of rules, and you stick to it. You can't then just pick and choose because you fancy it.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I just hate the fact that this will only apply to men. You know, it strikes me as a slight demonisation of these male migrants, because just because someone is a fit, healthy 25-year-old man doesn't mean that they're less likely to have been fleeing torture. So a woman who is an economic migrant wouldn't be subjected to this, but a man, purely by virtue of being a man, would be shipped off to Rwanda straight away. And, you know, imagine if you were, a gay person that had escaped Syria, been on the most perilous journey to get to our shores, and then you're shipped off, or put on a plane rather, to Rwanda, a country which tortures gay people, and you could be left there. And when Israel did this similar scheme, most of the 4,000 people it took to Rwanda escaped and fell into the hands of people smugglers once again.
Well, I suppose the argument would be, why don't they stay in France, or whichever country they pass through?
Well, France takes 3 to 4 times more refugees than we take, so while it's a valid argument, I just can't help but think, don't we have a moral and neighbourly obligation to take a reasonable number of these people? We talk about it in this country like we're Jordan or something, like we take millions of refugees. We don't. We take a really small number.
Well, why don't they then apply through the legitimate channels?
Well, do you know what I think is quite revealing about all this is that when the tragedy in Ukraine started to unfold, Eurostar said we'll give any Ukrainian a free ticket from Paris to London, and good on them. But the idea that that that's happening while people are literally dying in the waters that you're passing through on that train, I think is questionable of whether we should make it easier for them to get here legally, and then they won't be in the hands of these smugglers that are ruining their lives and making a fortune off them.
I was going to say, so there aren't also the safe and legal routes for asylum seekers. We have routes for refugees, we have routes for refugee family reunion, but we don't have them for asylum seekers. They have to be in the United Kingdom to launch that claim in the first place. So they have to make that journey. And if there were safe and legal routes available to them, then perhaps they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't look to people smugglers to get them across the channel. So I think we need to look a little bit harder at what we do over in Europe and beyond.
Well, it looks as though Priti Patel is having a tough time even talking her own staff into this.
She is. I don't think she gets on very well with the top staff at the Home Office. Now, some people might take that as an endorsement of her attitude, but they had to launch a ministerial direction, which apparently is when the permanent secretary of the Home Office in this case says that it doesn't represent value for money, so they had to force it through. Now, the value for money question, I think, is one that probably a lot of people will be bothered by, because polling out today says that more people agree with this policy than disagree with it, but it's going to cost about £20,000 to £30,000 per migrant or per refugee.
It's an astonishing amount, isn't it?
I mean, it really is, because you think about all the costs, there'll be legal costs, duty of care costs, the flying costs, putting them in accommodation for 3 months in Rwanda. Also, presumably they have to have inoculations if they're going to a country like that has to be provided for them. It's very expensive, and I think it's surely likely the real cost is far higher, because...
So Priti Patel has had to have this sort of directive to overrule the concerns of any of her own staff.
That's right, yeah, and it's only the second time it's been used in 30 years. The other time was the Windrush funding for victims.
But apparently Boris Johnson is very, very keen that she drives this through. So they're obviously determined that it will work.
And I bet he is, and I bet he's quite enjoying the argument, because of course we're not talking about the Partygate fines, of which there might be more, and also there's the local elections coming up. And
well, that will be the real key, won't it? Is whether this proves to be popular with the voters.
Exactly, and 60% of Conservatives support this, and only 10% of Labour. Now, what is Boris Johnson's big problem at the local elections? It's that Tories won't turn out because they're really angry that he took the mick with the breaking his own lockdown rules. Well, here's a policy that will probably turn Tories out.
Very cynical to suppose that, but do you think that's true?
I think any good journalist is cynical.
Advisor.
Yeah.
Do you think it's true?
Yeah, I think Benjamin's right, actually. And I do cynically think that perhaps there'll be legal objections to this, and then the Home Office and Boris Johnson can
back off it.
and say, yeah, absolutely, it's not us. They told us we couldn't do it. I mean, I'm being a little bit cynical, but you can see that narrative probably would come out in the long run.
Oh, well, we shall see.
Yeah.
Can we have a look at, Claire, this is in The Guardian, the climate protest, because obviously there's more and more stuff going on in London at the moment, which a lot of people are going to say, well, it's London, we don't care. But nevertheless, it's significant.
It is significant, and you've got Extinction Rebellion activists blocking bridges in London, I think Vauxhall Bridge, Westminster Bridge, and Blackfriars Bridge, protesting over climate change, which, is their right to a peaceful protest. But when it stops people going about their daily lives, it stops, especially on Westminster Bridge, it's one of the main routes into St Thomas's Hospital. I'm really against this kind of thing. Have a peaceful protest all you like. Please don't disrupt other people's lives.
If you're not disruptors, no one's going to listen to you.
But you can be disruptive. You can go and be disruptive elsewhere. You can go and actually campaign outside the buildings which hold that power. Why block a bridge which is going to affect normal people who don't have...
Because it gets us talking about it. We wouldn't really be talking about it if they just did it outside an office block.
Is that the problem, though, is that we are giving them all that airtime. I don't think gluing yourself to, one of the departments in London or an oil company's reception... Well, how is that going to help? It's actually just going to make people angry and turn against them. So I just think it's a bit counterproductive.
Do you reckon, Benjamin?
I mean, look, I think that you shouldn't be allowed to sort of block cars endlessly. That kind of pushes the boundaries of a functioning civil society. But there's no doubt that the fact they've done this has worked. We all have heard of Extinction Rebellion.
Yes.
And people are far more aware of the issues. You look at the polling, and the environment is consistently in the top 5 issues for voters. In fact, sometimes it ranks above immigration. And so it's clear that a lot of voters are concerned about this, even though they might look at the Extinction Rebellion people and think, they're a little bit nutty. Actually, some of the questions that have been raised and debates have been had have got people changing their minds, and I think the government knows that as well.
Can I talk about Harry and Meghan?
Yeah, the real issue here.
Well, the real issue. She's on the front page of nearly every single newspaper
Wearing
today.
Valentino.
Yeah, I mean, she looks wonderful. She looks gorgeous. It's like the old days again. Suddenly, you know, the press love her today. But what was going on, really? Do you think?
She does look stunning. Well, this is the Sun's front page, which is about the fact that Harry and Meghan went to see the Queen and Prince Charles at Windsor, and this is their first time in several years. Lilibet, the baby named after the Queen, wasn't there, so the Queen still hasn't met her own grandchild. But they say the Sun reports that Prince Harry was behind this meeting of them getting back together, and of course it comes after only recently he didn't turn up to his grandfather's memorial service because he said the security wasn't sufficient in this country. And I have to say, you know, one of the questions I thought when I saw that they were going to Holland for the Invictus Games was, well, how come Holland apparently is secure, but...
Well, they've given them VVIP status. Apparently the Netherlands has given them VVIP, means very, very important person. Apparently that's true. And therefore I presume the security they're being afforded in the Netherlands is enough to satisfy Harry.
I'll tell you what, I think most European royal families were at the memorial of Prince Philip, including our own, so I suspect it had VVVIP security at that. So, you know, I think they kind of had to see the Queen at this point, because how absurd it would have looked if they'd gone to Holland but still not turned up here.
It would have looked terrible, actually.
It would, although that doesn't usually stop them.
No.
Sympathy at this end of the table?
Well, not hugely. I mean, they gave their father, you know, he gave his father 15 minutes of his time. And I just feel, after everything that has gone on, and haven't we all learned that family is really, really important? And it just feels really off to say, well, we'll come and see you for 15 minutes, we'll pop in, so to wave at you know,
His
your
father
grandfather.
hasn't been to go and see him.
Yeah, but his caused the split. Who moved away? And I kind of think there needs to be a little bit of give and
Not
take.
only did he move away, but he was very rude about his father in the Oprah Winfrey
Absolutely.
interview.
And there's the book that's coming out, there is the series that they're doing, so he's not really helped himself. And I think it's really incumbent upon him to come to his father and...
The other thing that has been mooted in particularly the Mail today is they think they've got evidence that they did take a Netflix camera crew with them to Windsor. I don't imagine that camera crew would have been allowed inside the castle, but in other words, they were filmed on their way to Windsor and probably back from Windsor. So that visit is going to be part of the narrative of the documentary they end up shooting.
God, it's just so trashy.
That does feel trashy. I wonder if the Queen knew.
Yeah.
'Cause that is awful. That's like using her as part of the narrative.
I always liked Harry and Meghan. I actually sort of sympathise and agree with a lot of the kind of vaguely political statements they make, and yet even I feel like I can't defend them because, you know, they're just making a fortune, and they're making a fortune off the status that people of this country gave them.
Yeah, well, look, we shall have to just wait and see how it all pans out. Maybe bridges are being rebuilt, you never know. Benjamin, Claire, thank you. We'll catch up with you both a little bit later on.